In the vast, untamed heart of the West, the most dangerous trails are not on any map, but are the paths that connect two human souls. The wind howled through the Sierra Nevada, a mournful cry that chilled the soul. Kalen, a warrior of the Paiute people, moved like a phantom through the dense pines. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, caught what others would miss: a single, snapped branch on a young aspen tree. Lower, on the damp earth, a faint scuff mark. Then he saw it, a dark crimson stain on a fallen leaf. This was not the trail of a deer or a bear. This was human. A cold knot of apprehension tightened in his stomach. Trouble from the valley people always traveled uphill, bringing only sorrow with it. He followed the signs, his movements silent and deliberate. He found her at the base of a rocky outcrop, a cascade of golden hair fanned out against the dark soil. Her dress of fine blue cotton was torn, and a nasty gash marred the pale skin of her temple. Kalen's first instinct was to turn back. The elders' warnings were clear: do not meddle in the affairs of outsiders. Their world was poison. Yet, to leave her here was to condemn her to the mountain's cold embrace. In her hand, she clutched a small leather journal with a grip that even unconsciousness could not break. His law demanded he walk away. His heart demanded he stay. The struggle raged within him, silent and fierce. He knelt beside her, his warrior's heart softening at the sight of her vulnerability. He could not leave her to perish. Ignoring the voices of his ancestors, he made his choice. With a gentleness that belied his strength, he brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. Her breathing was shallow, her skin alarmingly cool to the touch. He knew he had little time. He carefully worked the journal from her fingers, tucking it safely into his own deerskin pouch. Then, he slid one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. She was a fragile bird, fallen from a distant sky. The journey to his hidden sanctuary was arduous. He navigated the treacherous terrain with an innate grace, his precious burden held securely against his chest. He moved through the forest not as an intruder, but as a part of it, his steps sure and soundless. He carried her to a secluded cave, concealed behind the shimmering curtain of a waterfall. This place was his secret, a refuge from the world and its troubles. He laid her down gently on a bed of soft furs, the roar of the water masking their presence from any who might follow. Here, under the mountain's protection, he would try to save the life of the stranger. Inside the grotto, the air was cool and still. Kalen built a small, smokeless fire, its warmth pushing back the damp chill. He examined the woman's wound more closely. It was deep, but clean. He recalled the shaman's teachings, the ancient knowledge of his people. He gathered what he needed from the cave's crevices, a specific type of moss known for its ability to draw out fever, and the leaves of a mountain arnica plant. He crushed the leaves into a paste, his hands working with practiced skill. He was a warrior, but he was also a healer. The two were different sides of the same spirit, the duty to protect life. When the woman awoke, her eyes, the color of a summer sky, were wide with terror. She tried to scramble away, a small cry escaping her lips. Kalen held up his hands, palms open, a universal sign of peace. He offered her a water skin, his movements slow and non-threatening. "I am Annalise," she whispered, her voice raspy. "From prosperity." He understood some of her words. He pointed to himself. "Kalen!" He could not speak her tongue well, but he hoped his actions would speak for him. He gently applied the cool poultice to her forehead. Her fearful gaze softened slightly, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. For several days, a quiet routine settled in the cave. Kalen hunted and foraged, bringing back roasted rabbit and sweet berries. He tended to her wound, changing the dressing daily. Annalise, the daughter of a doctor, watched his methods with a professional fascination. She had never seen healing done this way, with things pulled from the earth itself, yet she could not deny the results. The fever receded, and the wound began to close. The fear that had once filled her eyes was slowly being replaced by a tentative trust. She saw not a savage, but a man of quiet strength and profound kindness. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with unspoken questions and a growing awareness of each other. She would watch him as he carved a piece of wood by the fire, his strong hands moving with surprising delicacy. He would watch her as she brushed her long, wheat-colored hair, a simple act that seemed to hold a world of grace. One evening, as he adjusted her bandage, his fingers brushed against her cheek. The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt through them both. Their eyes met across the flickering firelight, and in that moment, a fragile connection was forged. When Annalise was strong enough to speak at length, she told him her story. Her words were hesitant, her English still a foreign sound in the cave's quiet. "I was gathering herbs for my father. 2 men, they came out of the trees." She described how they had cornered her, their faces cruel and greedy. They did not want her money or her jewelry. They wanted the journal. "They said it held a map," she explained, her voice trembling. "But it is just my father's book. Drawings of plants, nothing more." She had managed to break free and run, but in her panic, she had slipped and fallen from the ledge above. A shadow crossed Kalen's face as he listened. He retrieved the journal from his pouch and opened it. Annalise was right. The pages were filled with detailed sketches of flowers and herbs, but between the drawings, Kalen saw something else. Faintly etched symbols, almost invisible to an untrained eye. They were the ancient markings of his people. He traced a line with his finger, his heart pounding. This was no simple botanical reference. This was a guide to the sunken valley, a sacred place where the moonlight petal flower grew. It was the only known cure for the coughing sickness that was slowly stealing the breath of his people. The truth settled upon him with a heavy weight. The men who attacked Annalise were not simple bandits. They knew the journal's secret. He now understood the desperation in their eyes that she had described. The coughing sickness had begun to appear in the settlements as well, and the people there were just as desperate for a cure. Or perhaps they sought something else. Legends also spoke of the valley's other treasure, a vein of gold so rich it could make a man a king. Kalen looked at Annalise, her innocent blue eyes full of trust, and knew that he had stumbled into a conflict far greater than a random attack. "They will come back for this," Kalen said, holding up the journal. His voice was grim. Annalise's face paled. "What do we do?" she asked. He knew the cave was no longer safe. He had to get her to his village, where the warriors of his tribe could protect her. It was a risk. Bringing an outsider into their sacred lands was forbidden, but leaving her was a greater risk. He looked at her, at the quiet courage that had seen her through her ordeal. He felt a fierce, protective urge rise within him. "We go to my people," he said, his decision made. "You will be safe there." The journey to the Paiute village was a test of endurance. Kalen led Annalise along hidden game trails and across swift, icy streams. He taught her how to move silently, how to read the signs of the forest. She was a quick learner, her determination fueled by the ever-present threat of their pursuers. He found their tracks twice, the heavy boot prints of 2 men, clumsy and loud in the pristine wilderness. They were close. The knowledge spurred them onward, their pace quickening. The shared danger forged a bond between them that was stronger than words. They moved as one, their senses attuned to the forest and to each other. One afternoon, as they rested in a rocky alcove, Kalen sensed a change in the wind. The birds had fallen silent. He placed a hand on Annalise's arm, his eyes scanning the ridge above them. He saw a flicker of movement, a glint of sunlight on metal, an ambush. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. He melted into the shadows, circling around their position with the speed and silence of a hunting cat. Annalise held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. She heard a scuffle, a muffled cry, and then silence. Kalen returned moments later, his expression grim. "They are gone. For now." That night, they made a cold camp, without a fire to betray their location. The mountain air was thin and sharp. Annalise shivered, pulling her thin shawl tighter. Kalen sat beside her, a silent guardian in the darkness. He took off his own heavy buffalo robe and draped it over her shoulders. "You will be cold," she protested softly. He simply shook his head, his gaze fixed on the surrounding woods. She saw in his profile the unwavering resolve of a protector. In his world of harsh realities, she found a sense of safety she had never known. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he did not pull away. As they traveled, their communication evolved beyond simple gestures. He taught her the Paiute words for sun, moon, and water. She taught him more of her English. They shared stories of their different worlds, of her life in a bustling town, and his in the heart of the wilderness. She saw in him not a savage, as the people in her town would call him, but a man of deep wisdom and honor. He saw in her not a fragile outsider, but a woman of incredible resilience and a kind heart. Their hands would often brush as they walked, and each touch lingered a little longer than the last. A forbidden love was taking root in the wild heart of the mountains. The arrival of Annalise in the Paiute village sent ripples of shock and suspicion through the community. Children stared from behind their mothers' legs, and warriors watched with narrowed, distrustful eyes. An elder named Manu, his face a mask of disapproval, stepped forward. "You have broken the law, Kalen. You bring a stranger into our sacred circle." Before Kalen could reply, his father, Chief Akachita, emerged from the largest lodge. He was a man of immense presence, his gaze stern but just. He listened without interruption as Kalen explained everything, his eyes moving from his son to the woman at his side. Akacheta took the journal from Annalise's trembling hands. He recognized the symbols immediately. He looked at the faces of his people, at the telltale signs of the coughing sickness that was slowly claiming them. The shaman's remedies had failed. Desperation was a palpable thing in the village air. He looked at Annalise, at the honesty and fear in her eyes. "She may stay," he declared, his voice resonating with authority. "She will be under my protection." A murmur went through the crowd. It was a controversial decision, but the chief's word was law. Manu, however, continued to watch Annalise with cold, unforgiving eyes. Annalise knew she had to earn her place. Seeing the suffering around her, she could not stand idly by. Using the knowledge her father had taught her, she began to help the sick. She showed the women how to brew a soothing tea from juniper needles to ease the coughing. She insisted on separating the sick from the healthy, a concept foreign to the communal tribe, to stop the sickness from spreading. She could not offer a cure, not without the moonlight petal, but her simple practical measures began to make a difference. The hacking coughs in the night grew less frequent. The fevered brows of children began to cool. Slowly, the tribe's suspicion turned to respect. The women would bring her small gifts of food. The warriors would nod to her as she passed. She was no longer just the outsider. She was the healer. Kalen watched her with a growing sense of pride and a deepening affection. He saw how she cared for the children, how she treated the elders with gentle respect. She was fitting into his world in a way he never thought possible. But his heart was heavy. He knew that the men who hunted her were still out there, and that their presence cast a dark shadow over this fragile peace. And he could not ignore the hostile glare of Manu, who saw her not as a savior, but as a harbinger of doom. Back in the dusty town of Prosperity, the air was thick with greed. Cornelius Sterling, a man whose wealth was matched only by his ruthlessness, slammed his fist on his mahogany desk. His hired man, a brute named Quinn, stood before him, head bowed. "She vanished. The savage must have taken her," Quinn grumbled. Sterling's eyes were cold chips of ice. He did not care about the moonlight petal. The legends he chased were of a different color, gold. The sunken valley was rumored to hold a fortune, and that journal was the key. He needed it back, and he needed the girl silenced permanently. Sterling paced his office like a caged wolf. He needed leverage, a way to intensify the search. He summoned the town sheriff, a man named Miller. "I want a posse," Sterling commanded. "Find the girl, and find the savage who took her." Sheriff Miller, a man with a weak chin and shifty eyes, wrung his hands. "On what charge, Mr. Sterling?" Sterling smiled, a chilling, predatory expression. "Kidnapping. And I am offering a generous reward." The poster went up the next day, featuring a crude drawing of Kalen and offering a staggering sum for his capture and for the return of Annalise, dead or alive. The true, sickening nature of the conspiracy ran deeper than anyone knew. Sheriff Miller was not just a corrupt official in Sterling's pocket. He was Annalise's uncle, her late mother's brother. He had known about his brother-in-law's journal and the legends surrounding it for years. Consumed by jealousy and greed, he had been the one to tell Sterling about the map. He had helped orchestrate the attack on his own niece, expecting the thugs to retrieve the journal and leave her lost in the mountains. Her survival was an unwelcome complication. He had betrayed his own blood for the promise of gold. Sterling, armed with the information from the treacherous sheriff, now knew his target was not just any native, but a Paiute warrior. He also knew that a simple posse would be no match for a whole tribe. He needed a different kind of weapon. He sent Quinn to a notorious saloon on the edge of the territory, a gathering place for the worst kind of men. Quinn's job was to recruit a small army of mercenaries, men with no morals and a thirst for gold. Sterling's plan was no longer just to retrieve a map. It was to wipe out the entire Paiute village and take the valley for himself. The reward for Kalen was just bait to draw out the desperate and the deadly. Quinn, a master of deceit, knew a direct assault on the Paiute village would be foolish. He devised a more cunning plan. He and his newly hired band of cutthroats found the tribe's hunting grounds. They waited. When a small party of Paiute hunters left the village, Quinn saw his chance. He ordered his men to create a diversion, setting a fire on a nearby ridge. As the main body of warriors raced to fight the blaze, Quinn and a select few of his men would use the chaos to sneak into the now poorly defended village. Their target was singular and specific: get the girl in the journal. The cry of "Fire!" echoed through the village. Panic erupted. Kalen, along with his father and most of the warriors, immediately raced towards the smoke, their thoughts on protecting their ancestral lands. A skeletal force of young and old warriors remained behind. In the ensuing confusion, Quinn and his men, their faces smeared with mud, slipped into the village like snakes. They moved swiftly towards the lodge where Annalise was helping the shaman tend to the sick. The remaining guards were quickly and quietly overwhelmed, their struggles silenced before an alarm could be raised. Annalise looked up from the child she was comforting, her eyes widening in terror as the hulking form of Quinn filled the doorway. "We meet again," he sneered, his gaze falling on the leather journal tucked into her belt. She screamed, a desperate cry for help. Kalen, who had felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread and turned back, heard her. He burst into the lodge just as Quinn's men grabbed Annalise. He fought with the fury of a cornered mountain lion, a whirlwind of controlled chaos. He managed to drive them back, creating a precious few seconds for Annalise to escape into the melee outside. But the victory was hollow. As Quinn and his men retreated into the darkness, they did not leave empty-handed. In the chaos, they had seized another prize. They dragged with them Kalen's younger sister, the gentle Nita, her terrified cries cutting through the night. They vanished into the forest, leaving devastation in their wake. Kalen stood frozen, the relief of seeing Annalise safe instantly replaced by the heart-stopping agony of his sister's capture. The raiders had failed to get the map, but they had taken something far more precious. They had taken his blood. The tragedy struck him like a physical blow, filling his heart with a cold, burning rage. The weight of Nita's capture crushed Kalen's spirit. He saw his sister's terrified face in the dancing flames of the campfire, heard her cries on the wind. Annalise sat beside him, her own heart aching with a profound sense of guilt. "This is my fault," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They came for me, for the journal." Kalen looked at her, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. He reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "No," he said, his voice low and steady. "The fault lies with the greed in their hearts, not the goodness in yours." But they both knew their lives were now irrevocably intertwined by this tragedy. They could not hide any longer. The time for defense was over. It was time to attack. But a direct assault on Sterling's fortress-like ranch in prosperity would be suicide. They needed a plan, one born of cunning, not brute force. "We cannot fight them on their terms," Kalen said, his mind racing. "We must use our own strengths." Annalise nodded, her fear giving way to a steely resolve. "You know the mountains," she said, "and I know the town. I know its people, its routines. I know my uncle." The name hung in the air, heavy with unspoken betrayal. They would use their combined knowledge to strike where their enemy least expected it. Their plan was audacious. They would not attack the ranch. They would infiltrate it. Sterling was known for his lavish parties, gatherings of the territory's most influential figures. It was a display of power and arrogance. Annalise knew he was planning his annual Founders' Day gala in just 2 nights. He will be surrounded by guests, she explained. Politicians, bankers, even a federal marshal is expected to attend. He will feel untouchable. Kaylin saw the brilliance in her idea. Amid the celebration, security would be focused on the guests, not on the shadows. It was the perfect cover. The objective was twofold: rescue Nita, who would surely be held somewhere on the property, and find proof of Sterling's crimes. Annalise was certain that a man as arrogant as Sterling would keep records of his dealings, evidence that could expose him and the sheriff to the federal marshal. It was a desperate gamble. If they were caught, they would face certain death. But the thought of Nita, alone and terrified, fueled their courage. They would walk into the lion's den, armed with nothing but their wits and a shared determination to see justice done. Their 2 worlds would collide in a final, daring confrontation. The night of the gala arrived, the Sterling ranch ablaze with lanterns. Music and laughter drifted on the cool night air. Annalise, her golden hair hidden beneath a simple bonnet, slipped through the service entrance dressed as a kitchen maid. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her face was a calm, emotionless mask. She moved through the bustling chaos of the kitchen, her eyes and ears open. She overheard 2 guards complaining about duty. One mentioned having to watch the savage girl in the old carriage house. She now knew where Nita was. She had to get the message to Kaylin. Her opportunity came in the form of a clumsy kitchen boy who spilled a tray of wine glasses. In the ensuing commotion, Annalise created a small diversion of her own, discreetly knocking over a large pot of stew near the back door. As the staff scrambled to clean the mess, she slipped outside into the darkness. Kaylin was waiting, a silent shadow among the manicured hedges. She quickly told him about the carriage house. He nodded once, his eyes conveying a world of gratitude. "Now for your part," he whispered. "Be careful." He pressed a small, carved bird into her hand before melting back into the night. While Kaylin made his way to the carriage house, Annalise returned to the main house. Her next target was Sterling's private study. She knew it would be locked, but she had learned a thing or two about the inner workings of the ranch from the gossiping staff. Using a forgotten service corridor, she reached the study's balcony. The latch on the French doors was old and weak. It gave way with a soft click. Inside, the room smelled of leather and cigar smoke. She moved quickly to the large oak desk. In a locked drawer, she found what she was looking for: a ledger detailing land purchases and letters from Sheriff Miller, explicitly outlining their conspiracy. Just as she secured the documents, Kaylin appeared at the carriage house. He dispatched the 2 guards with silent, non-lethal efficiency, using his knowledge of pressure points to render them unconscious. He found Nita inside, frightened but unharmed. He quickly freed her and led her back towards the woods. Meanwhile, Annalise walked calmly out of the study and into the grand ballroom. She waited for a lull in the music, then stepped into the center of the room. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice clear and strong. All eyes turned to her. She held up the ledger. "I have something Federal Marshal Thompson needs to see." A stunned silence fell over the ballroom. Cornelia Sterling's face turned a shade of purple. Sheriff Miller looked as if he had seen a ghost. "What is the meaning of this?" Sterling boomed, trying to regain control. But it was too late. Annalise began to read from the ledger, her voice ringing with conviction. She detailed the illegal land grabs, the intimidation of honest settlers, and the conspiracy to steal from the Paiute people. Then she read from her uncle's letters, exposing his betrayal for all to hear. The federal marshal stepped forward, his face a grim mask of authority. "Is this true, Sheriff?" he demanded. The sheriff crumbled, confessing everything in a pathetic, blubbering heap. Sterling, seeing the walls close in, made a desperate move. He drew a small firearm from his coat, grabbing a nearby guest as a shield. Panic erupted as guests screamed and scrambled for cover. But before he could make his next move, a figure dropped from the rafters above. It was Kalen. He landed silently behind Sterling, disarming him with a single swift motion. The firearm clattered to the floor. The great Cornelius Sterling, the tyrant of prosperity, was helpless. The marshal's men quickly moved in, securing both him and the disgraced sheriff. In the aftermath, justice was swift. Sterling and Miller were taken into federal custody, their reign of greed and corruption over. Nita was reunited with her family, and the journal, with its sacred map, was returned to Chief Akachita. The people of the Paiute tribe could finally gather the moonlight petal and heal their sick. The cloud of fear that had hung over both the village and the town of Prosperity had finally lifted. Annalise was no longer a fugitive, but a hero. Kalen was no longer seen as a savage kidnapper, but as a noble warrior who had fought for justice. Standing on a hill overlooking the valley, Kalen and Annalise watched the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The two worlds they came from seemed so far apart, yet they had found common ground. "You cannot stay with my people," Kalen said softly, his voice filled with sadness. "And you cannot go back to a town that betrayed you," she replied. He took her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. "Then we will not choose," he said, a smile touching his lips for the first time. "We will build a new world, just for us." They found a small, fertile valley nestled deep in the mountains, a place where they could build a home, a bridge between two peoples, a testament to a love that was strong enough to overcome any border.